The first time my mother-in-law suggested I wasn't good enough for her son, she did it with a smile, holding a cup of Earl Grey tea in her perfectly manicured hands. "I just want what's best for Daniel, dear," she said, her voice dripping with honey-coated venom. "My name is Reagan, and I've spent the last 5 years trying to be the perfect wife, only to realize perfect isn't good enough for Christine King." "When are you two planning to give me grandchildren?" Christine asked during our weekly Sunday brunch, the same question she'd been asking every week for the past 3 years. I felt Daniel squeeze my hand under the table, but he remained silent, as usual. "We're focusing on our careers right now," I replied, the rehearsed answer feeling stale on my tongue. The truth was messier, filled with negative pregnancy tests and tearful nights, but Christine didn't deserve to know that part of our lives. "Tabitha's youngest just started walking," Christine continued, referring to her friend's daughter. "Such a precious time. I do hope I get to experience that joy myself. Someday." The pause before someday felt like a knife to my heart. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mum, please." "Oh, I'm just making conversation, darling." Christine waved her hand dismissively. "Reagan knows I mean well, don't you, dear?" I forced a smile. "Of course." Later that evening, as Daniel and I cleaned up after dinner at our own home, I could feel the weight of unspoken words between us. "Your mother means well," I said, more to fill the silence than anything else. "I know she can be intense," Daniel replied, drying a plate. "But she loves us." I wanted to argue, to tell him about the way she looked at me when he wasn't watching, the subtle digs wrapped in politeness, the constant comparisons to other women. But I stayed quiet, just like I always did. "Jolie called earlier," I said instead, mentioning my sister. "She wants us to come over for dinner next weekend." "Ah, I can't. Mum's organising something at the house. She says it's important, something about future family planning." Daniel's casual tone made my stomach drop. "You should come too." "Future family planning," I repeated, my hand freezing mid-wipe on a wine glass. "Yeah, she wasn't very specific. Probably just wants to discuss holiday arrangements or something." I nodded, but something felt off. Christine never did anything without a precise purpose, and future family planning sounded ominously specific. That night, I couldn't sleep. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Daniel, and made my way to our home office. Opening my laptop, I pulled up Christine's social media. 20 minutes of scrolling revealed nothing unusual until I spotted a comment on one of her friend's posts. "Looking forward to introducing Tabitha to the family next Sunday. She's exactly what we need." My blood ran cold. Tabitha. The name triggered a memory, Christine mentioning her at brunch, but there was more. I'd heard that name before, multiple times. Always in passing, always with that tone of admiration Christine never used when speaking about me. I grabbed my phone and typed out a quick message to Jolie. "Need to talk. Emergency." Her response came immediately. "Call me." I stepped onto our balcony, the night air cool against my skin. "I think Daniel's mother is trying to set him up with someone else," I whispered into the phone. "What? That's insane." Jolie's voice crackled through the speaker. "She's invited this woman, Tabitha, to a family planning meeting, the same Tabitha she's been not so subtly mentioning for months." "That manipulative "I know," I cut her off, glancing back through the glass doors to make sure Daniel was still asleep. "I don't know what to do." "You need to tell Daniel." "And say what?" "Hey, honey, I think your mom is trying to replace me with her friend's daughter. He'll think I'm paranoid." "Then we'll prove it," Jolie said firmly. "Send me everything you have. We'll figure this out." As I hung up, I heard movement inside. Through the glass, I watched Daniel turn over in his sleep, peaceful and unaware. My wonderful, loving husband, caught between his wife and his mother, never seeing the war being waged around him. I stepped back inside, my mind racing. For 5 years, I'd played the perfect daughter-in-law, swallowing every subtle insult, accepting every criticism. But something inside me had shifted. The thought of Christine sitting in her pristine living room, planning my replacement while sipping her precious Earl Grey, made my blood boil. This time would be different. This time I wouldn't just smile and nod. This time I would fight back. Holy shit, Reagan, look at this. Jolie spun her laptop around, nearly knocking over her coffee cup in the process. We were sitting in her cramped home office, surrounded by the organised chaos of her freelance photography business. The screen showed Tabitha's social media profile, young, blonde and accomplished. She looked exactly like Christine's type, but it wasn't her perfect smile that made my stomach turn. It was her latest post. So excited to meet a special family this weekend. Sometimes life gives you unexpected second chances. Posted 3 days ago, I read aloud, my voice shaking. She tagged Christine in it. There's more, Jolie said, scrolling down. They've been commenting on each other's posts for months. Look at this one from Christine. You would make such a wonderful addition to our family. I felt sick. She's been planning this for months. That's not all. Jolie pulled up another window. Tabitha is a fertility specialist. She runs her own clinic downtown. A fertility specialist? I laughed bitterly. Of course she is. Christine probably thinks she's the answer to all her grandchildren's prayers. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Mum wants to know if you're coming Sunday. What should I say? I showed Jolie the message. Tell him you have food poisoning. Or better yet, tell him the truth. I shook my head. I need more proof first. Something concrete. Then let's get it. Jolie grabbed her car keys. Tabitha's clinic is 15 minutes away. Time for some reconnaissance. What? No, we can't just... Watch me. She was already heading for the door. Coming. 20 minutes later, we sat in Jolie's car outside Tabitha's clinic, watching people come and go. This is insane, I muttered. What's insane is your mother-in-law trying to set your husband up with another woman. Jolie pointed at the entrance. Look, there she is. Sure enough, Christine was walking into the clinic, her designer handbag swinging from her arm. My heart raced. Follow her, I said, surprising myself. We slipped into the clinic behind her, pretending to be interested in some pamphlets, while Christine spoke to the receptionist. Mrs. King, Dr. Erickson will see you now, the receptionist called out. Perfect timing, Christine said, standing. I wanted to discuss Sunday's arrangement. As she disappeared down the hallway, Jolie nudged me. See? This isn't just a casual brunch. It's an ambush. Excuse me, a friendly voice interrupted us. We turned to find an elderly man in a cardigan watching us with knowing eyes. I couldn't help but overhear. You're Daniel's wife, aren't you? I tensed. How do you... I'm Solomon, he said softly. I've known Christine for years. I've watched her meddle in things she shouldn't. He glanced around before continuing. If you're looking for answers, you might want to check your husband's medical records. Christine requested copies last week. She what? My voice came out sharper than intended. She doesn't have that right, Jolie protested. Solomon smiled sadly. Christine has ways of getting what she wants. Always has. He handed me a business card. If you need someone to talk to, someone who understands what you're dealing with, give me a call. After he left, Jolie and I stared at each other. Why would Christine want Daniel's medical records? I wondered aloud. Maybe she's trying to prove there's something wrong with you, Jolie suggested. You know, to convince Daniel you're the problem. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Daniel. Mum says she has something important to discuss about our future. Please come Sunday. I showed Jolie the message. You need to find out what's in those records, she said firmly. How? I can't just walk in and demand... No, Jolie interrupted, a gleam in her eye. But you're his wife. You can schedule a consultation. For both of you. I stared at her. You want me to schedule a fertility consultation? Think about it. If Christine is planning what we think she's planning, you need to know exactly what she knows. And maybe... Jolie paused. Maybe it's time to get some real answers anyway. I looked at the clinic entrance, then at my phone with Daniel's message still glowing on the screen. 5 years of trying, of disappointment, of Christine's subtle blame. 5 years of questions we'd been too afraid to ask. Okay, I said, standing up, let's do it. As we approached the reception desk, I felt a strange mix of fear and determination. Whatever Christine was planning, whatever secrets those medical records held, I was done being in the dark. Sunday's family planning meeting wasn't going to go the way Christine expected. Not this time. Solomon's antique shop smelled like old books and furniture polish. I found him in the back, carefully restoring a Victorian music box. "I was hoping you'd come," he said, setting down his tools. "Tea?" "I scheduled a fertility consultation," I blurted out. "For tomorrow." He nodded, gesturing to a worn leather armchair. "Does Daniel know?" I told him it was a surprise, that I wanted to take the next step in our journey together. I sank into the chair. He seemed happy. And Christine? Still planning her Sunday ambush. I pulled out my phone, showing him the latest social media updates. She and Tabitha had lunch yesterday. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. Solomon poured 2 cups of tea, his movements deliberate. "You know, I was there when Christine drove away Daniel's first girlfriend in college. Sweet girl named Maria. Christine decided she wasn't ambitious enough. What happened to her? Married a doctor in Boston, has 3 kids now." He smiled wryly. "Christine never forgave herself for that. Those could have been her grandchildren." "Is that why she's so obsessed with me having babies?" "Partly." Solomon handed me a cup. "But mostly, it's about control. Christine needs to be the architect of her son's happiness. Anyone who threatens that becomes the enemy. Like me. Like you." He sat across from me. "But you're different from Maria. You're fighting back." I stared into my tea. I don't even know what I'm fighting for anymore. What if there is something wrong with me? What if Christine is right? About what? Your worth as a human being? Solomon's voice sharpened. "The moment you start measuring your value by Christine's standards, she wins." "But, no buts." He leaned forward. "Tomorrow, you'll get answers. Real ones. But whatever those answers are, remember this. Christine's actions aren't about fertility or grandchildren. They're about power." My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Mom's being weird. Keeps talking about new beginnings and family healing. You sure you can't come Sunday?" "He's so blind to it all," I muttered. "Men often are when it comes to their mothers." Solomon stood, walking to an old cabinet. "You know what's interesting about restoration work? Sometimes to fix something valuable, you have to break it apart first." He returned with a small wooden box. This was Christine's. She pawned it years ago during a rough patch. Never came back for it. Inside was a stack of old photographs. Young Christine holding baby Daniel. Christine at Daniel's graduation. Family vacations, birthdays, holidays. "She looks happy," I said, surprised. She was. Before the divorce, before she had to rebuild her life from scratch. Solomon took the box back. That's when the control issues started. She swore she'd never let anyone else make decisions for her family again. So she makes them for everyone else instead. "Exactly," he paused. "The consultation tomorrow. Use it. Not just for answers, but for ammunition." "Ammunition?" "Information is power, Reagan. Right now, Christine thinks she holds all the cards. She's planned this Sunday down to the last detail. But what if you change the game entirely?" Understanding dawned. "You want me to crash her party?" "I want you to take control of your own story," he smiled. "And maybe teach Christine a lesson about karma in the process." My phone buzzed again, Jolie this time. "Found more dirt on Tabitha. She's been divorced twice. Both times married men with controlling mothers. Sound familiar?" I showed Solomon the message. History repeating itself, he mused. Or trying to. "Not this time," I said, standing up. "Tomorrow I get answers. Sunday, I use them." "Be careful," Solomon warned. "Christine won't take this lying down." "Good." I gathered my things. It's about time she stood up and faced what she's doing. As I reached the door, Solomon called out, "Reagan, remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about forcing them to face their own reflection." Walking to my car, I felt lighter somehow. Tomorrow's consultation loomed ahead, but it no longer felt like a threat. Instead, it felt like ammunition, just as Solomon said. I texted Daniel, "Can't wait for our appointment tomorrow. Love you." Then I texted Jolie, "Keep digging on Tabitha. I want to know everything." Finally, I saved Sunday's brunch in my calendar, adding a simple note: the day Christine learns about karma. Whatever tomorrow's results showed, whatever Christine had planned for Sunday, one thing was certain: I wasn't going to be the quiet, compliant daughter-in-law anymore. It was time to show Christine that her perfect plan had one fatal flaw. She'd underestimated me. The fertility clinic waiting room felt colder than it should. Daniel held my hand, smiling encouragingly, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. "This was a great idea, honey," he said, "taking charge of our future like this." If only he knew how right he was. A nurse called us in, leading us through a maze of corridors. Not Tabitha's office, thankfully. We'd been assigned to Dr. Matthews, a kind-faced woman in her 50s. "So," Dr. Matthews said, reviewing our file, "you've been trying for 5 years?" "Yes," Daniel answered. "We thought maybe it was just timing, but—" "Have either of you been tested before?" I watched Daniel's face carefully as he answered. "No, I guess we were afraid of what we might find out." Dr. Matthews nodded. "That's common, but knowledge is power. Shall we start with some basic tests?" The next hour passed in a blur of blood draws, forms, and questions. So many questions. Had we tried tracking ovulation? Yes. Any family history of fertility issues? Not that we knew of. Any previous pregnancies? No. Finally, Dr. Matthews called us back to her office. "We'll need a few days for most results," she explained, "but there are some things we can determine immediately." My phone buzzed. Jolie. "Christine just posted about Sunday, looking forward to a life-changing family gathering. What's the plan?" I silenced my phone as Dr. Matthews pulled up some charts on her computer. "Daniel," she said gently, "your preliminary results show significant issues with sperm motility and count. This would make natural conception extremely difficult, if not impossible." The room went silent. I felt Daniel's hand go rigid in mine. "What?" he whispered. "There are treatments we can discuss," Dr. Matthews continued, "but I want to be clear, this isn't something that will resolve on its own." I watched my husband's face crumble, years of unspoken guilt and blame suddenly redirected. "But my mother always said—" He stopped himself, but I knew what he meant. Christine had always implied the problem was me, all those pointed comments about my age, my stress levels, my career focus. "Reagan's preliminary results, on the other hand, show normal fertility levels," Dr. Matthews added, though I barely heard her. My mind was racing. Christine had accessed these records. She knew. She had to know. And yet she'd spent years subtly blaming me, and now she was trying to set Daniel up with a fertility specialist. "Can we get these results in writing?" I heard myself ask. "Of course." Dr. Matthews began printing documents. "I'll have the full report ready by Friday." Friday. 2 days before the Sunday brunch. Daniel was quiet as we left the clinic, his usual confidence shattered. In the parking lot, he finally spoke. "I need to process this. Maybe take a walk." "Want company?" He shook his head. I need to think." As he walked away, my phone buzzed again. Jolie. "Found something big. Come over now." 20 minutes later, I sat in Jolie's office, staring at her computer screen. "Look at this," she said, pulling up Tabitha's medical license records. She lost her practice in Boston 3 years ago. Guess why? Why? She was caught falsifying fertility records for wealthy clients, changed test results to push expensive, unnecessary treatments. Jesus. I sat back. Does Christine know? She must. The records are public. Jolie pulled up more documents. But wait, it gets better. Guess who helped Tabitha set up her new practice here? My blood ran cold. Christine? Bingo. She co-signed the lease on the clinic building. They've been planning this for months. I felt sick. She knew about Daniel's infertility. She knew, and instead of supporting us, she planned— What? To have him leave me for a disgraced fertility doctor? A disgraced fertility doctor who owes her everything, Jolie corrected. Think about it. Christine would have complete control over both Daniel's new wife and any future grandchildren's conception. My phone lit up with a text from Daniel. "Mum keeps calling. I can't deal with Sunday right now. Can you tell her we can't make it? I showed Jolie the message. Perfect, she said. Let her think you're not coming. Then show up with those test results and expose everything. I thought about Solomon's words about karma and reflections, about Christine's years of manipulation, about Daniel walking alone somewhere, carrying a burden that was never his to bear alone. No, I said slowly. I have a better idea. Better than public humiliation? I smiled. A plan forming. Much better. We're going to give Christine exactly what she wants. A Sunday brunch about family planning. Just not the way she planned it. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time for some truth-telling. I pulled out my phone. But first I need to make a call to Solomon. We're going to need help setting the perfect stage. Are you absolutely sure about this? Solomon asked, arranging vintage teacups on his antique dining table. We'd chosen his house as neutral ground for what I was calling the counter brunch. Christine's brunch starts at 11, I said, checking my phone. Ours starts at 10. Daniel just needs to choose which one to attend. And you think he'll choose this one? I handed him the invitation I'd crafted. Daniel, before you make any decisions about our future, there are truths you need to know. Come to Solomon's at 10 a.m. Sunday. All your questions will be answered. Reagan. Intriguing enough to make him curious, Solomon nodded. But vague enough to avoid tipping your hand. My phone buzzed. Jolie. Tabitha just posted, ready to meet my destiny tomorrow. Gag. She's really laying it on thick, I muttered, showing Solomon the message. Christine's influence, he said. She always did have a flair for dramatic timing. The doorbell rang. Dr. Matthews stood outside, clutching a manila envelope. The full test results, as requested, she said, handing them over. Are you sure you want to do this? Medical information is usually handled more privately. Privacy has been weaponized against us long enough, I replied. Thank you for coming. After she left, Solomon helped me arrange the documents on the table. Daniel's results, Tabitha's disciplinary records, Christine's property documents showing her connection to the clinic. Everything laid out like a prosecutor's evidence. Now we wait, Solomon said. Have you heard from Daniel since the clinic? He's been distant, processing. I checked my messages. Christine's called him 12 times. Damage control, Solomon mused. She knows the test results threaten her narrative. My phone lit up. Daniel. Mum's getting pushy about tomorrow. Says she has life-changing news. What's going on? I showed Solomon the message before replying, I have life-changing news too. Solomon's 10 a.m. Your choice. Brief, Solomon approved, but powerful. Now comes the hard part, I said, sinking into a chair. Waiting. The next morning dawned clear and cold. I arrived at Solomon's at 9, my stomach in knots. Jolie was already there, setting up her laptop to document everything. Tabitha just checked in at Christine's house on social media, she reported. Posted a picture of Christine's famous scones with the caption, New Beginnings. If everything goes according to plan, she'll be choking on those scones, I muttered. At 9:45, Solomon's antique clock ticked loudly in the silence. My phone buzzed. Christine. Daniel tells me you've invited him to some sort of meeting. Whatever you're planning, don't embarrass yourself further. I showed Solomon and Jolie the message. She's scared, Solomon said. She knows she's losing control. 9:50. No word from Daniel. 9:55. Jolie squeezed my hand. He'll come. 9:58. A car door slammed outside. He's here, Solomon said, peeking through the curtains. And he's not alone. My heart stopped. Christine? No. Solomon smiled. Dr. Matthews. I might have suggested she drop by. 10. The doorbell rang. Daniel stood on the porch, looking tired but determined. Dr. Matthews stood behind him. I ran into Dr. Matthews in the parking lot, he said. She mentioned you'd asked her to come. Please come in, Solomon said. We have a lot to discuss. Daniel's eyes widened as he took in the documents spread across the table. What is all this? The truth, I said simply. About everything. Your mother's brunch starts in an hour, Dr. Matthews added. But first, I think you need to see what she's been hiding. Daniel picked up the first document, his complete fertility results. Then Tabitha's disciplinary records. His hands shook as he read. Mom, she knew, he whispered, all this time. Keep reading, Jolie encouraged, pulling up more evidence on her laptop. As Daniel absorbed each new piece of information, I watched the realization dawn in his eyes. Years of manipulation, carefully documented and laid bare. There's more, I said softly. But first, you need to decide. Do you want to know everything? Or do you want to go to your mother's brunch and hear her version? Daniel looked at his watch, then at the documents, then at me. In that moment, I saw the weight of his choice, the comfortable lie versus the painful truth. Finally, he pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. We all heard the whoosh of the text sending. What did you tell her? I asked. That I won't be coming to brunch, he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in days. I told her I'm exactly where I need to be. Solomon quietly began pouring tea. Then let's begin, shall we? We have quite a story to tell. Daniel isn't coming. Christine's voice echoed through her phone's speaker as Jolie's laptop recorded everything. Something about being with Reagan. Should we proceed anyway? Tabitha's uncertainty was clear even through the speakerphone. Absolutely. He'll come around once he sees what he's missing. I checked my watch. 11:15. Daniel sat beside me, his jaw clenched as we listened to his mother plot. They've been trying for 5 years, Christine continued. Once he realizes you can give him what she can't... Enough, Daniel snapped, though they couldn't hear him. His hands were shaking as he held the fertility report. Solomon's doorbell rang, right on schedule. That'll be Maria, Solomon said, standing. Maria? Daniel's head snapped up. My ex-girlfriend Maria? Who your mother drove away 15 years ago, I explained. Solomon thought we should hear her story too. Maria looked exactly like her social media photos, successful, confident, and very pregnant with her 4th child. Her eyes widened when she saw Daniel. I didn't believe Solomon when he called, she said, sitting down, but after what he told me about Christine's latest scheme... Tell him, Solomon encouraged. Tell him what really happened senior year of college. Maria took a deep breath. Your mother told me you were getting back together with your high school girlfriend. Said you were just too nice to tell me yourself. What? Daniel's face went pale. But I never... Meanwhile, Maria continued, she told Daniel I was accepting a job across the country, Solomon added. Said Maria was too ambitious for family life. Classic Christine, Jolie muttered, still monitoring her laptop. Guys, Tabitha just posted a photo from Christine's house. Caption says, ready to meet my future family. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Christine. Darling, please come home. Tabitha is such a lovely girl, and she understands our family values. Family values, Daniel repeated bitterly. Like lying, manipulation. Dr. Matthews cleared her throat. There's something else you should know. The treatment plan Tabitha was suggesting for you both. It's nearly identical to the fraudulent protocol she used in Boston. Unnecessary procedures, I added. Expensive ones. All while knowing the real diagnosis. Daniel stood abruptly, pacing Solomon's living room. I need to confront her. Wait, I said, pulling out my phone. Look at this first. I showed him Christine's social media post from that morning. Today, we welcome a new chapter in our family's story. Some doors must close for better ones to open. She's already telling people, isn't she? Daniel's voice was quiet. That's why all these family friends are suddenly showing up at her house. Jolie nodded, turning her laptop to show the growing number of check-ins at Christine's address. She's gathered quite the audience. Perfect, I said, standing. That's exactly what we need. What do you mean? Daniel asked. Your mother wants an audience for her grand revelation. I gathered the documents into my bag. Let's give her one. But we'll be the ones doing the revealing. Reagan, Daniel started. She needs to face what she's done, Maria interjected. Not just to you and Reagan, but to everyone she's manipulated over the years. I agree, Solomon said. Sometimes public consequences are the only way to break patterns of behavior. Daniel looked at each of us. then at his phone as another message from Christine came through. "Son, please, this is about our family's future." "You're right," he said finally. "She needs to face this, all of it." "Then let's go," I said, checking the time. "They should be just sitting down to brunch." As we gathered our things, Jolie's laptop pinged with another update. "Oh, this is rich," she said. "Tabitha just posted, 'Some people are meant to be mothers. Others should accept their limitations.'" Daniel's face hardened. "Let's go." We filed out to our cars, a strange procession. Me, Daniel, Maria, Dr. Matthews, Solomon and Jolie with her laptop full of evidence. As we drove toward Christine's house, my phone lit up one last time. "Christine, whatever you're planning, remember, I always win." I showed it to Daniel, who was driving. "Not this time, Mom," he muttered. "Not this time." As we pulled up to Christine's perfectly manicured house, we could see the gathering through the large bay windows. Christine at the head of the table, Tabitha at her right hand, surrounded by family, friends and relatives. "Ready?" I asked Daniel. He took my hand, squeezing it firmly. "Ready." As we walked toward the front door, I thought about Solomon's words about karma and reflections. Christine wanted a public spectacle about family. She was about to get one, just not the one she planned. The sound of clinking glasses and polite laughter stopped abruptly when we walked into Christine's dining room. 20 faces turned to stare at our unlikely group. "Daniel," Christine stood, her perfect hostess smile faltering. "And Reagan, I thought you weren't—" Her voice died as she noticed the others. "Maria? Solomon? What is the meaning of this?" "Please, continue your brunch," I said, my voice steady. "We wouldn't want to interrupt your special announcement." Tabitha shifted uncomfortably in her seat beside Christine. Her Instagram-perfect smile looked considerably less confident in person. "Daniel," Christine tried again, "whatever Reagan has told you—" "Actually, Mom," Daniel cut in, "why don't you tell everyone why we're really here today? About your plans for my future?" Christine's eyes darted around the room. I simply wanted to introduce Tabitha to the family. She's a wonderful fertility specialist who lost her medical license in Boston for fraud," Dr. Matthews interrupted, stepping forward. "And who, thanks to your financial backing, opened a new practice here with the intention of implementing the same fraudulent treatments." Gasps rippled through the room. Tabitha's face went white. "That's absurd," Christine sputtered. "I would never—" "Really?" I pulled out the property documents. "These lease agreements say otherwise. Shall I pass them around?" An elderly aunt reached for the papers. "Let me see those." "This is ridiculous," Christine snapped. "Daniel needs someone who can give him a family. Reagan has failed." "I'm infertile, Mom." Daniel's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Me, not Reagan. You've had access to my medical records for months. You knew." The silence was deafening. Christine's perfect mask cracked. I only wanted to control everything," Maria stepped forward. "Just like you did 15 years ago when you lied to both Daniel and me to break us up." More murmurs from the gathered family. Christine's cousin stood up. "Is that true, Christine? Like what you did with Thomas's wife?" "And Sarah's husband," another relative added. "Enough." Christine slammed her hand on the table. "Everything I've done has been for this family's best interests." "No," Solomon said quietly. "Everything you've done has been for control. And look what it's cost you." Jolie turned her laptop around, displaying the social media trail of Christine's manipulation. Years of subtle digs, orchestrated meetings, carefully crafted lies. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Daniel asked, his voice breaking. "That I wouldn't eventually learn what you've been doing to Reagan? To our marriage?" "I was protecting you," Christine insisted. "Reagan can't give you children." "But Tabitha could." I stepped forward. "With her history of medical fraud? Or was that the point? To have a daughter-in-law who would be completely under your control, dependent on your silence about her past?" Tabitha stood abruptly. "I should go." "Sit down," Christine hissed. "This isn't over," I finished for her. "You're right. Because now everyone knows about the lies, the manipulation, the fraud. How many families have you torn apart, Christine? How many lives have you tried to control? The room erupted in overlapping voices as relatives began sharing their own stories of Christine's interference. Years of hidden resentment bubbled to the surface. I did it all for love, Christine said, but her voice was small now. For family? No, Mom, Daniel said softly. You did it for yourself, and it ends today. He turned to the gathered family members. I'm sorry for what she's done to all of you. But today, we're taking our lives back. Christine sank into her chair, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Tabitha had already slipped out during the chaos. Daniel, please, Christine whispered. You're my only son. And I'll always be your son, he replied. But not your puppet. Not anymore. He took my hand. Reagan is my wife, my family, and if we never have children, that's something we'll face together, without your interference. The room had gone quiet again, but this time it was different. The silence felt like healing, like truth finally breaking through years of carefully maintained lies. We're leaving now, Daniel announced. Anyone who wants to know the full truth, Solomon has copies of everything. As we turned to go, I heard Christine call out one last time. Reagan, wait! I paused at the doorway, looking back at the woman who had tried so hard to destroy me. She seemed smaller somehow, older, stripped of her power. You'll never win, she said, but it sounded more like a question than a statement. I smiled, thinking of Solomon's words about karma and reflections. I already have, Christine. The truth won, and that's all that matters. We walked out into the sunlight, leaving Christine alone with the consequences of her actions, surrounded by the wreckage of her carefully constructed lies. The autumn breeze rustled through Solomon's garden as I helped him arrange chairs for his weekly neighborhood tea gathering. These had become a regular thing since the confrontation at Christine's house, a gentle rebellion against her exclusive brunches. Look who finally decided to join us, Solomon nodded toward the garden gate. Christine stood there looking smaller in her casual clothes, holding a simple homemade cake instead of her usual elaborate pastries. I brought dessert, she said quietly, if that's all right. Solomon smiled. There's always room for one more. I watched as she placed her cake on the table, her hands trembling slightly. This was the first time I'd seen her since that day, though Daniel had been meeting with her for weekly counseling sessions. Reagan, she acknowledged me, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. I wasn't sure you'd be here. I help Solomon set up every week, I replied. You'd know that if you'd accepted his previous invitations. She nodded, running her hand along one of the mismatched vintage teacups. These are beautiful, not perfect, but beautiful in their own way. That's the point, Solomon said, setting down the last chair. Perfect is overrated. The garden gradually filled with an eclectic mix of neighbours, including Maria, who now lived a few streets over. She'd moved back after her husband got a position at the local hospital. Christine, Maria said, surprisingly warm. I saved you a seat. I watched them talk quietly, years of hurt slowly giving way to cautious healing. Daniel arrived last, straight from work, his face lighting up when he saw his mother there. Mom, you came. I'm trying, she said simply. As Solomon served tea in his wonderfully mismatched cups, I noticed how different this felt from Christine's carefully orchestrated gatherings. Children played on the lawn, cups occasionally spilled, and nobody seemed to care about social status or family connections. I've been thinking, Christine said suddenly, loud enough for nearby conversations to pause. About what you said that day, Reagan, about winning. I set down my teacup. And you were right. But not in the way I thought. She looked around the garden. This is winning. This messy, imperfect happiness. Mom, Daniel started, but she held up her hand. Let me finish. I spent so many years trying to control everything, to make everything perfect. I missed out on real relationships, real love. She turned to me. I missed out on having a real daughter-in-law. Christine, no, please, I need to say this. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry for everything. The manipulation, the lies, the hurt I caused. I can't take it back, but I can try to do better. Solomon refilled her teacup. Trying is all any of us can do. Actually, Daniel said, squeezing my hand, we have something to share. All eyes turned to us. We've been approved for adoption, I said. A baby girl. Her birth mother chose us last week. Christine's teacup clattered against its saucer. You're going to be parents? If you'd like, I said carefully, you could be a grandmother, a real one. No manipulation, no control, just love. Tears welled in her eyes. I'd like that. Very much. But, Daniel added firmly, things have to be different. I know, Christine whispered. I know. Maria raised her teacup. To new beginnings, real ones this time. As everyone toasted, I felt Daniel's arm around my waist, solid and secure. Across the garden, Jolie was showing Solomon how to use social media on his phone, probably to share photos of his tea gatherings. Christine was quietly asking Maria about her children, genuine interest replacing her usual competitive edge. You know, Solomon said, joining us with a fresh pot of tea. Sometimes the best families are the ones we build ourselves, flaws and all. Speaking of building, Christine said hesitantly, I've been thinking of turning my house into a community centre for families dealing with infertility, adoption, all the things I used to judge. Maybe help other mothers learn from my mistakes. That's actually a wonderful idea, I said, surprised. Would you help? She asked. Both of you? I don't trust myself to do it alone. Daniel and I exchanged looks. We'll think about it, he said. As the afternoon light softened, I watched Christine join a group of children admiring Solomon's koi pond, her perfect posture relaxing as she knelt down to their level. She looked different somehow. Lighter, more real. Ready to go home? Daniel asked softly. I looked around the garden one last time, at Solomon's mismatched teacups, at Christine's imperfect but heartfelt cake, at this wonderfully messy gathering of healing hearts. Actually, I said, I think we are home. Because sometimes winning isn't about defeating your enemies. Sometimes it's about helping them find their way back to humanity, back to love. And sometimes the most perfect endings are the ones that remain beautifully, wonderfully imperfect.